You're listening to Big World Network.
The Rise of the Dragons, Episode 1, written and read by Dora Gonzalez. Kel staggered to his feet and took in the dim sphere hovering in the center of the cave. The light revealed that he was alone, and he leaned against a wall for support. His entire body ached, and his side throbbed. He ran his fingers across his tattered shirt and lifted the ruined material up. His entire left side was covered in bruises and caked blood. He rubbed at the side of his head and tried to recall what had transpired. He remembered dashing up the winding stairway of the dark tower. He remembered Adela yelling at him to keep moving, followed by a scream, and then nothing. The banging in his head seemed to muffle his thoughts, the harder he tried to remember. He glanced around again, and made his way to the opening of the cave. Kel's eyes took in the black tower in the distance. The stone structure stuck out like dark spheres against the night sky. A ruffling sound came from his right, startling him to slip further into the cave and unsheath his sword, his eyes searching for a shift in the darkness. The ruffling increased, and a shadow emerged. Kel's stance relaxed when his gaze fell on Adela's small figure. He could make out a small bundle in her hands, and he sheathed his sword. Giving Adela's shadowy figure one last glance, he moved to the center of the small cave and leaned against one of the walls once more, when his boots scraped against something lying on the cave floor. "Watch it!" Adela cried out, kneeling beside him and setting down the bundle she carried. "Must you march about stepping on everything the moment you wake up?" "It's just broken glass. Why do you bother keeping those pieces?" Kel replied, a frown replacing his stern expression. His memory was starting to return. Adela didn't answer, but continued inspecting the broken mirror pieces. The tension in the cave thickened, and Kel shifted his position on the wall, his feet nudging the bundle Adela had placed near his feet. She really had to stop placing things in the most inconvenient places. An apple and a few berries rolled out of the bag, revealing its contents. Kel kneeled and gathered the few provisions Adela had gathered, and placed the entire bag back where she had set it down, guilt already forming in the pit of his stomach. Not only had he let himself get injured, relying on Adela's magic to save them, but now the young girl was gathering food for them on her own to boot. His eyes wandered to Lucius's daughter, and the guilt increased. Several cuts decorated the young woman's lips and the side of her face, the fresh ones already starting to heal. Kel forced his gaze to move past the dry blood clinging to her cloak, and to the cause of their entrapment. The mirror in Terdune had been destroyed. The shimmering pieces scattered in front of them were obvious of that fact. How had it been destroyed? He did not know, but an inking in the back of his mind spread to the rest of his body, causing the hairs on the back of his neck to stand on end, and his hand moved to the hilt of his sword. "Relax, we are safe," Adela stated between sighs. Her chest ached from the tussle she had partaken with 2 goblins and a harpy that had wandered too close to the hideout. Her eyes glimmered with tears, and she pushed her fear and sadness back. With her amulet robbed from her, their only other way off Terdune had been the mirror, and that too had been torn from her grasp. "We are trapped, but not beaten," she sighed again, her fingers shakingly clinging to the shattered pieces of the magical mirror. Her tear-stained eyes turned towards the direction of the Black Castle, taking in the too familiar structure in the distance and the torches encircling the base of each tower. Lucius's army hadn't made it through the mirror before it shattered either, adding to the dangers lurking in Terdune, as the soldiers were now their enemy. She let her attention shift back to the mirror shards. "We can't stay here," Adela said, gathering the pieces of the broken mirror and stuffing them into the hem of her cloak. She rose to her feet, only to kneel once more, when the shards slipped back onto the ground. She cursed under her breath, and grasped the hem of her cloak with greater resolve, tugging the material and slipping the broken mirror pieces into the makeshift pouch. Kel bent down and placed a hand over Adela's hands to calm her. A shout behind them had her jerking her hands back. A shard of the mirror sliced Kel's palm open, and he muffled the winch. The shouts grew louder, and with the darkness surrounding them. Kel rushed to his feet, only to fall back down to his knees. "Kel, What's wrong? Kill! Adele's words, and the countless shuffling of feet as new opponents entered the cave, became lost underneath the layer of voices suddenly echoing in his ears. Kel clung to his head and tried to blink back the voices bombarding his mind. For a moment the ground seemed to shift and change around him. He was no longer with Adela, but in the woods. Arrows swooshed past his ears, and he instinctively swerved around a tree to evade them, joining the old man who had helped him escape. The large tree and the growing darkness helping to secure their cover. "We should be safe here, for a while," the elderly man gasped, pressing his hand tighter against his wound. "Once it is fully dark, we can sneak past them and escape through one of the mirrors." Kel turned around and stared at his companion. A fire grew in his heart, and he gripped the old man by the neck. The desire to dig his nails deeper into the delicate flesh, surging through every fiber of his being. "What are you doing?" the old man cried out, his protest lost in the black eyes that stared back at him. Kel growled, his hold tightening. "Do you think I wouldn't remember you after all these years? My king." "Do you not recall that I helped you?" the old man gasped between breaths, his blood-covered fingers desperately trying to loosen Kel's grip. "Help the way you helped my father," Kel sneered, tying his hold on the old man. He slammed him against the tree and stepped closer until his eyes were inches from the old king. "Now is not the time," the old man pleaded, his hands tugging at Kel's arms to no avail. "There's far more at stake than the wrong I did to your family." Shouts erupted from all sides, followed by a ruffling of foliage and snapping of twigs. Lucius's men were back on their trail. It would not be long before they were found out. Kel released his hold, his hands turned to fists, and he stepped back, needing to add distance between himself and the man he hated even more than Lucius, the man he had thought long dead, his father's murderer. Then a shadow beast sprung out of the darkness and lunged at Kel. The old man shoved Kel to the side, and the beast dug its fangs into his leg, toppling the old king to the ground. He kicked at the magical beast, but the foul creature refused to loosen its hold. Kel rushed to save him. Although the hate still simmered inside him, he grabbed hold of the old man's arm and tugged as hard as he could, but he could not free him completely from the monstrous grasp. The king slipped something into Kel's hand and met his gaze. The sadness Kel saw there, erasing the anger he felt. "Kel, you must undo the horrors the pain I brought upon my son have caused." The old man gripped Kel's arm and struggled harder against the beast's thrashing, every word coming out with greater pain. This key will help you do that." A second shadow beast sprung out of the darkness and lashed onto the old man's neck, his blood coating the ground, and now the fangs of both shadow beasts. An arrow whooshed inches from Kel's face, and in seconds he was surrounded by Lucius's men. He slipped the single metal key into his boot and lunged at the man closest to him. Before he could land a punch, two more shadow beasts stalked out of the darkness and tackled him to the ground. His head smacked against the tree trunk, and everything went black. Kel snapped awake, the vision of memories he had forgotten vanishing with the still of the night. He felt a hand over his mouth, and his muscles tensed. In a shift of feet, he tossed his assailant off him, pinning the small frame beneath him. He pressed his elbow against the person's slim neck. "They are just below us," Adela half whispered, half gasped beneath him, her words causing Kel to loosen his hold. "My father's control on them is gone. We must move, there are too many." Kel took in the sounds around them, noticing they were no longer in the cave, but atop the mountain. Adela had transported them, yet again. A shift in the shadows confirmed Adela's claims, and he helped her to her feet, now noticing that the key the old king had given him had slipped from his boot. The intricate carvings in the key shimmered in the moonlight before regaining its original color and blending into the grass. The shouts grew louder, and Kel and Adela slipped down the other side of the mountain into the projection of giant rocks, the key and its secrets abandoned.
You're listening to Big World Network.